Thanks for stopping by to my channel again today. I'm sure you've been getting real information and real education from my channel, learning how to do it yourself, DIY, on different sewing projects. Today we'll be learning how to make the jumpsuit. I'm sure you'll like the sound of that. The jumpsuit is a combination of the upper bodies and the lower block. So if you're a beginner, you would want to learn how to make your trousers block and then your upper bodies. This one is an asymmetric neckline that I'll be teaching today. That's the overlap bodies on the trousers block. So if you're new to my channel, please hit the subscribe icon and the bell icon too, so that every time I post a new video, you will be the first to get the notification. And then if you're on Facebook, you can join my Facebook group on Fashion Life and Style W/Debbie Rose. On Instagram is Debbie Rose _fashion. And then you can also follow me on Instagram at I am Bookie _Olajide. If you have your comments, if you have questions, please leave it in the comment section and I'll be glad to hear from you. And if you have any other sewing projects you think I should teach you, please make your suggestions in the comment section. Now let's go over to the table as I show you how to cut and sew. Now for our jumpsuit, this is going to be the back block, because I'll be fixing an invisible zipper at the back. So it's just going to be 1/2 inch for my visible zipper. That's why I pinned it here, for you to see that point. And this is the center of the back block. Now this is going to be an overlap jumpsuit because the front is overlapped. That's why I'm using my back block to cut the basic blouse form. Now you're going to get your 1/2 length measurement. That's shoulder. You mark your shoulder to bust. For this tutorial I'm using 10. Then I'll be adding 1/2 inch allowance for the joining of the shoulder. You must add that allowance here. That shoulder to bust 10 plus 1/2, shoulder to under bust 13 plus 1/2, then shoulder to waist is 18.5. But I always tell my students to subtract 2 inches from that if your dress will have a joining. So on that joining point, that is the 1/2 length. So 18 inches minus 2 is 16.5. But then you add 1 inch seam allowance to it. So that way you will know where your circumference measurements should be. So on the circumference point, remember that I said I have my zipper allowance here already. So I'll be placing my tape rule from the tip there. That center, this is the center of the back now. I want to get the round measurement. So the bust circumference is excuse me, 38. 38 divided by 4 is 9.5. 38 divided by 4 is 9.5. So you put the quarter, that quarter there, 9.5, and then you add 2 inches seam allowance to the bust area. The under bust is 33 inches. Remember, we're marking from that zipper point. 36 divided by 4, the quarter is 9. You mark 9, and you also add your seam allowance. So the under bust circumference is what I usually use, I always use for the 1/2 length. So you also mark that here. And that's it. It's been cut out. Now to get your armhole circumference, your armhole you divide by 2. The armhole for this person is 17. Divided by 2, we have 8.5. So you can see that point. That's what I have here. And so you're going to be marking your shoulder, which is 7.5. That's 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So that's what I have on this point. So you use your armhole curve. Okay, I want to shape that properly. So use your armhole curve in curving that point out. If you know how to cut the basic dress, the basic blouse, basic block of a dress, then you won't have a problem getting this explanation. So that's for that. So we want to get our dart points. Now your neck width, your neck length is dependent on you. And remember to slash your shoulder by 1 inch. So to get our dart points, you can divide your bust. Okay, sorry, you measure your nipple to nipple measurement. For this person is 8, that is 4. 8 divided by 2, you're dividing by 2, you mark 4. And then you also add ½ inch allowance, so that by the time you sew it together, it's going to go back to the original 4. And then the length of that will be that. To get the length of your dart, you're going to mark 1 inch below the bust, 1 inch below the bust, and then you get the remaining measurements. So 6 inches will be my dart length, and the width of the dart is 8 divided by 2 plus ½ inch, that is 4½. We want to now get the front measurement, the front block. So you're going to fold your fabric into 2. You fold into 2, and then you place the back block we've cut. You place it on it like this. Please look closely. Place it on it like this. And now I'll be pinning the two together, the front and the back together. Now you use your chalk to trace the back. The back. Use it to trace it on the front area like this. And then you can remove this. This is the ½ inch, remember, for our zipper allowance, the invisible zipper. So now you just mark 6 or 7 inches for the neck length. I'm going to mark that on this point. And then from the extension here, I'll be extending here by 4 inches. My overlap, I will extend it by 4. But if you want it, full, you want it to enter one another very well, you can measure 6 or 7 inches. So let me do 5 inches now. That's from this point, not from the allowance, from the center itself. 5. So now we're going to connect this point to this point to this point. Just watch. We're connecting like this. So you can either cut this as a straight line, or you can go this way. If you want to curve it, you can curve it out like this. It depends on whatever you want, but I want to go with the curved point. So that's the outcome of our cutting. You can see my curve. So just to cross check, you can see that's the back block and this is the front block. So let me open it up now for you to see. We open this up. We're going to sew in our darts, and you place this on top. And you also place this way. So that's the overlap form. Overlap. So you're going to cut your lining the same way. We'll cut the lining the same way. So we'll be picking our darts on both the fabric and the lining. For the lower part of the jumpsuit, that's the trousers area, you're going to mark your half length. Remember, the upper block stopped at the half length, and your half length is just 2 inches above your navel. So the half length is 16½, and then the navel, which is the waist point, is 18½. So I added ½ inch seam allowance because you'll be joining the lower part to the upper part with ½ inch. So that made it 19. And so waist to hip is 7 inches. That's 7 plus ½ inch. Remember, the ½ inch for the joining, you must include it in all your measurements. Now the waist to the knee is 19.5 inches. You have to measure that. Then you put half inch also, and then you mark it all the way to your ankle. That's the trousers length, the full length. So now we'll come to the half length area to get our crotch. Now to get your crotch, just measure 2 inches the from the side. You measure 2 inches. You measure 2 inches. That's from your waist downward. Now, the length of your crotch, the standard measurement is your hip circumference divided by 4. Your hip circumference divided by 4. That is the standard length of the crotch. Now, the hip circumference for this tutorial is 42 inches. 42 divided by 4 is 10.5. So you're going to mark from the waist down to 10.5. You mark it there. Put the 2 also. And then now you connect on a straight line into the half length area. But mind you, your crotch length is going to be from your waist downwards, not from the half length. It's from your waist downwards. So that's 10.5. So at this point, you just cross it this way. You cross, and then you take your curve, your French curve, and you're going to curve that point like this. So now we want to work on the circumference now. Now before we get the circumference, whatever pattern you are using, get the midpoint of that pattern, the midpoint. So I'm going to be measuring my pattern. What I have here is 16 inches. So the half of 16 is 8. So I'll be marking that 8 inches all the way from top down. It's so that your knee circumference and the ankle will balance properly. Now, we want to get our circumference measurement. You can see this is the plumb line. The plumb line is the demarcating line at the middle of the pattern. That's your plumb line. So we begin our measurement from the crotch. Look at this, not from the 2 inches extension here. You are ignoring this point. So you begin your measurement from here. So the waist is 35 inches. 35 divided by 4. That's the quarter of 35. Is 8.75. So I'm going to be marking that here, and then I'll add 2 inches seam allowance because of the dart. Now on the half length, I always like to use the under bust circumference because it's not too close, because it's not the waist. So let's use the under bust circumference. Here is 33.5 divided by 4 is about 8.28 or thereabout. Is more than 8.25. So you just mark the stroke before 8.5. Then you add 2 inches allowance. You mark it here. Now on the hip is 42. 42 divided by 4 is 10.5. You mark 10.5, and because your dart will not be getting to the hip, just put 1.5 inches seam allowance here. Now on the knee point, the knee circumference is 17 inches. Now I'll be dividing 17 by 4. 17 divided by 4 will give me 4.25. 4.25. So you're going to place the 4.25, that's 4.25, on the plumb line. You place it on the line here, and then you mark the beginning of your meter rule, and then you multiply 4.25 by 2. That gives you 8.5. So you also mark that here, and then now you'll be adding half-inch seam allowance on both sides. If you want more allowance, you can put 1 inch, but I don't want the side of the trousers bulging, so it's just okay. It's ½ inch. Now the ankle circumference is 14. 14 divided by 4 is 3.5. You mark that there, and then you multiply by 2, that gives you 7. Then you add ½ inch, same allowance on both sides. Then you're going to take your ruler and you connect the ankle to the ankle to the knee, and then you connect the knee to the crotch, So we'll come to the other side too, and you mark that as well. So you connect the knee to the hip, connect the hip to the waist, and half length. So this is basically how to draft any type of female trousers. There are different methods people use, but this is the simplest method. So now I'm going to cut out my pattern. I'll be cutting this out for you to see now. For this point, the hip point, you're going to use your French curve in curving that point, so it won't be pointed. You curve it in like this, and you trim out that pattern. So I'm going to place this on the fabric now. And this is the outcome of our cutting for the trousers block. To cut your sleeve, the blown sleeve, you fold your fabric into 2, and you measure your shoulder to elbow. Here is 11 inches. But because the blown sleeves, we have elastic band at the circumference, and then we're going to smoke it up. So I always like to add 4 inches extra to my length. But if you want it fuller, you can add as many inches as possible. But just put 4 inches like that. And then from that 4 inches, you mark the, you need to get the length that you have here, 15 inches on this point too. That's 15. Now you mark the cap height. Now for those who have been conversant with the sleeve cutting, your cap height is your bust divided by 12 plus ½ inch allowance. But for this tutorial, I will use 3 inches as the cap height, like this. And then I'm going to just curve in. This is a basic tutorial, so I expect that we know it already. And then so you're going to just confirm with the armhole. The armhole circumference for this person is 18 inches. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So you're going to mark 9 inches there, plus 1 inch allowance. If you want, you can put ½ inch allowance, 1 inch allowance. So on the circumference, a sleeve circumference is 14. 14 divided by 2 is 7. You mark 7. But because it's an extended sleeve that is going to be smoked together, you're going to add about 6 inches more. So that's 7. If you want it fuller, you can increase. So let's do 7 inches in all. So that's 7, that's 14. So I'm going to be connecting from this allowance, seam allowance, to this circumference. So that's your sleeve, the circumference, the armhole slope, and then the length. After picking your darts on the lining and the fabric, you will iron the interfacing
I'm using the paper stay, the black one. You iron it on, depending on the color of your fabric, you iron on the neckline for the two overlaps, and then you sew 1/2 inch on the center. After sewing your 1/2 inch, you then notch it round with your scissors. You notch it round. Make sure you don't cut into the seam line. Notch round. And once you're done with that, you open up the block, that's the front block, and then you let the seam rest under the lining, and then you'll be top stitching a 1/4 inch on it. Top stitch a 1/4. After top stitching, this is what you have. So by the time you lay your dress, you see, even without ironing, it will lay. If you don't top stitch, by the time you're wearing the clothes, there's a tendency that the lining will be puffing out like this, and that's not neat. So you always top stitch the seam on your lining, then you iron for the two sides. For the trousers, you're going to pick your darts. I use 7 inches length for my dart, 7 inches, and then you're going to sew 2 of the trousers block together with 1/2 inch into the crotch area. You sew it up, and then you open up like this, so that we can place the upper block on it. You can see I'm pinning the front block to this space. The dart points must meet each other. They must meet. So you place that down. Now you take the other block, we've pinned them together. So by the time you open up, oh my God, see how beautiful it is. See? So that's the cross here. So now we're going to be sewing on there. So you can trim off, we're going to trim off this excess. Trim off. So I'll be sewing 1/2 inch now. For the back block, you put your interfacing, that's the paper stay, on the neckline, and then after sewing on the neckline of the lining, and then you're going to sew 1/2 inch round, just like we did for the front block. When you notch it round, you then top stitch the lining, the seam line, this seam on the lining. You top stitch it round so that it can lay properly. And after that, this is what you have. And then you also pick your darts on the lining separately and on the fabric separately. That's for the two sides of the back. Now for the lower block of the back, you also pick your darts. You can see the darts here. You also pick it on both sides of the pants. You're going to pin the upper block to the lower block of the back. You're going to pin, and then you sew 1/2 inch this way. You sew 1/2 inch. So now we're going to place the back block on the front. You place the front block on the back block. You can see the two blocks. So we're going to be sewing the shoulders together. You make sure they align, and then you open up one of it. You place the second in between the lining and the fabric, and then you turn it over, and you'll be sewing 1/2 inch on the shoulder like this. After sewing your shoulders, make sure you iron properly, and then now you would align. The back now has been placed on the front. Make sure you align the joining. Let them meet each other on the side block, and then you pin the joining together. That's on both sides. You pin your joining together. Now we're going to sew the tie area. Look at this. You pin them together and you sew half an inch. Remember, we used half an inch allowance, so you'll be sewing half an inch on both sides of the tie. Now we want to cut the side pocket, the visible pocket. So you fold your fabric into two, fold into two, and you place your hand this way. Look at the shape of your hand. It's going this way. So you're going to curve your pockets following the shape of the hand. Remember to spread out your hand and you follow the shape. So you just cut this out. So by the time you measure, make sure you have 10 inches on this opening, 10 inches, and then you have 8 inches on the opening of the pocket. 8 inches here, 10 inches wide. So I'll be cutting 2 pockets for both sides. Now you're going to mark the shoulder to waist point. This is 18.5 inches. And then you take the pocket. You have to look at the placement of your pocket. Look at this. This is going down. So you place this here. And then you open up the block like this. And then you put the pocket beside it. And you pin it down. You pin it. So the pocket is going to run from your waist into the hip. Into the hip. Take this up. And then we place the other side. You also pin this down. And you do that for the other side of the trousers too. And you sew half inch down. You sew half an inch. So if you have your red bias strip, use it to cover up this mess. Use it to cover up this point because we didn't use lining on the lower block. Now you'll be sewing, you shape your measurements on both sides. You mark your shoulder to bust. So you mark your shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, waist and the hip. So you get the the half of your circumference on that point. On those points, you mark the half of your circumference like that. And so you'll be shaping it out. And once you get to this point, you come down a bit. Just watch. You come down a bit and then you go half inch. You're going to be sewing half inch round. You'll be sewing half inch round. And when you get to this point, you then come back to the original measurement, which is 1 inch allowance. So if you have put half inch allowance, just sew half inch all the way down. Just before you finish up the sewing, you're going to leave some inches. Remember, we added 2 inches seam allowance to the length of the jumpsuit, and then we've used half an inch to join the lower block to the upper block. That has left us with 1.5 inches. So you're going to fold the M line by 1.5 inches. You fold, and then you're going to now fold in half inch at the edge this way, and then you sew this round. So sewing that round, you then take the crotch area. Remember, we joined the front block of the crotch, so you just continue sewing the crotch like this. You hold the underneath together, and then you sew your half inch continuously to the back. You keep sewing like this. Now you're going to know the length of the space you leave by putting your invisible zipper. Just use it engaging the length, and then so I'll be sewing to this point upward here. it has to be above the stopper of your zip here. So I'll be sewing my crotch to this point before I then fix the invisible zipper. So once you're done sewing that, we want to fix our zipper now, the invisible zipper. This is the right side of the invisible zipper. So you turn it opposite on the dress like this, and then you take it to the top. Remember, we put only ½ inch allowance. So you're going to hold this to the side, and then you pin it to the edge. You pin that all the way down. So I'm going to be sewing. You're going to sew, open up your, like this, you bend it open, and then you sew close to the teeth of your zipper. To make your sleeves, you're going to fold 1 inch upward like this, 1 inch, and then you bend in a quarter, and you sew on the sleeve circumference for the 2 sleeves. Once you're done sewing the sleeve circumference, you then take your ½ inch elastic band, elastic, 1/2 inch size. Then you take your safety pin, so you insert it into the edge of the elastic band, and then you take it into the opening of the sleeve circumference. You keep pushing it out like this. Once you're done, you then fold it into 2, and so you measure your original sleeve circumference. Just add about 1 inch ease to it, and you measure that here, and so you pull this out, you hold this together. Look at your sleeve now, and so you just sew in 1 inch. I'll be sewing in 1 inch for the allowance I left. I'll just sew in 1 inch now. Once you're done sewing, this is what you get for your sleeve. So I'm going to pull it out, turn it to the right side, and then you take the block of your jumpsuit, you open it up like this, you open it up, and then you place the armpit area of your sleeve against the armpit area of the jumpsuit, and then we're going to pin that together. So you're going to pin it round the sleeves before you sew. So, and that's the finished product, the finished look of your blown sleeves. Look at this, and then look at the jumpsuit. That's the asymmetric overlapping. Have this, so you can put a brooch or your press button to just hook this down. And look at the beautiful jumpsuits. Thanks for watching. And this is the outcome of our jumpsuit.